throws one up in the air. Smith caught it for the win. Got it! An improbable.
It's very difficult not to spend money when you have plenty, isn't it? That feeling of just getting paid and being at the mall, wanting to buy things you probably don't need. But what would you think if I told you that this also happens in the NBA? Rebuilds are a complicated process. Years of defeat that culminate with getting it right in a draft, which, as we've said many times, is a real lottery in itself. The Houston Rockets are an example of a project that's gone through this situation, in which the teams managed to accumulate the necessary assets and money in the form of salary cap space to build a championship team. Although the decisions they've made may already be definitive, for better or for worse. Let's travel back to January 12, 2021. James Harden, franchise player of the Rockets for almost a decade, is not very happy with the latest decisions of Houston's management and wants to be traded. To get it, he neglects his fitness, or as fans like to say, the Rockets decide to accept the maximum number of assets for the Beard, who ends up leaving for a return of 7 first-rounders to Houston in a 4-way trade between the Houston Rockets, Brooklyn Nets, Cleveland Cavaliers, and Indiana Pacers. That was exactly ground zero of the current rebuild of the Texas franchise. Since then, the outlook has not been very encouraging for Houston fans. During the 3 seasons since the Stars' departure, the Rockets have posted 17, 20, and 22 wins, seasons that have relegated the team to the NBA's bottom of the standings. But knowing how the league works, we can deduce that this poor basketball performance has clearly been deliberate. At the time of Harden's trade, Houston had not drafted a player in 3 years, not in the first and not in the second round. The status of their superstar forced the team to invest all their future in the present.
It in, does to Smith. Jabari for 3 and the win! Yeah!
Just as many other franchises have done trying to maximize the window in which they can win the championship. Ultimately, Harden was unable to elevate the team to the next level, leaving Houston in a very precarious situation. As a result of trading the former MVP candidate at the high point of his career, Houston was rewarded with 7 first-round picks over the last 3 years, including 2nd overall in 2021, the number 3 pick in 2022, and the 4th pick of 2023. But how many of those picks actually panned out? Jalen Green came to the Rockets in 2021, hoping to lead a franchise that was completely lacking in scoring. Well, rather, they lacked almost everything needed to be a good basketball team. And despite the player's continued high self-confidence, his efficiency hasn't exactly been elite.
Either Harden lost the handle, picked up by Green, Green to the rim,
Despite averaging 22 points per game, his field goal shooting, 3-point shooting, and free throw shooting percentages are down from his rookie campaign. But Jalen's still 21 years old and has a long career ahead of him to become a top player. During the 2022 draft, the Rockets acquired Jabari Smith Jr. with the 3rd pick in the draft. The power forward out of Auburn has had similar problems to Jalen Green in translating his game to the NBA. He's averaged 13 points and 7 rebounds per game, with poor shooting percentages of 41% from the field and 31% from 3-point range. So again, we're talking about another inefficient young stud taken with a high draft pick. And just a few weeks ago, the Rockets drafted Amen Thompson. This overtime elite developed player is a guard with spectacular physical qualities who, like his brother Asar, has great potential to become a quality player.
Thompson, look at the speed and the change of hands.
However, at the moment, these are only speculations, and until the season starts, we won't be able to know the real scope of the choice. But even if the Rockets' selections have been questionable, it's true that the management has obtained some players through trades that have accelerated the rebuild. Alperen Şengün is a high-quality center that came to Houston from the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Turk has a very special skill set for his position, in a style of play that seems somewhat reminiscent of Nikola Jokic, averaging 15 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists per game in just 29 minutes of play. The center's efficiency seems to indicate that Houston has a good piece to build on. Yet another similar case is Kevin Porter Jr., who's averaged 19 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists this season. This has already been his 3rd season in Houston, but it's undoubtedly been the best of his short career. But best of all, the Rockets got his services in exchange for only 2 second-round draft picks and a trade exception.
Run the play, attack, get a piece of the paint, good things happen.
Because really, this kind of rebuild works by trial and error. When you manage to accumulate a lot of young talent on your roster, it's only a matter of time before one of these players explodes and makes the leap to the next level. However, talent is not the only factor that plays a part in the NBA. The winning culture. We're tired of hearing this term. But even though it sounds like it is, it's not just a cliche. Many rebuilds have gone down the drain in the history of the league for failing to establish a winning culture among their players. Talented players pass through their squads only to blossom on other teams because they often don't know how to win. And it is here precisely where experience gains importance. Houston knows perfectly well that it has to find players who are capable of guiding the young players. And for that reason, they've committed $209 million on just 2 players during this month of July. Fred VanVleet put an end to his time with the Toronto Raptors while the franchise is going through a transition process, and knowing that he would end up making more money elsewhere.
Up top to VanVleet, triple. It's clean for Fred VanVleet.
The Rockets, being a team made up of mostly players on rookie contracts, were able to table him an offer he couldn't refuse. $128 million for 3 seasons. VanVleet is a point guard who made the All-Star team during the 2021-2022 season, but has only managed to hit 39% of his shots from the field this season and 40% for his career. A terrible percentage for a player who's going to be paid $42 million this season. For their part, and despite the dissatisfaction of most fans, the Rockets have also signed Dillon Brooks to an $80 million contract for 4 seasons. A player with a defensive profile but who can score very inefficiently. And a player who's been one of the stories of the playoffs, but not exactly for his basketball skills. After averaging 39% shooting from the field last season, Dillon received word that the Grizzlies were not interested in keeping him. Between Dillon and Fred, the Rockets have committed about 45% of their salary cap between these two over the next 3 years. Ime Udoka will be tasked with making a compatible group of players that has a lot of work to do to compete for the playoffs in a tough, revamped Western Conference. Udoka himself is also a question mark surrounded by his off-court allegations, as he was dismissed for his non-basketball issues despite leading the Celtics to an NBA Finals in the previous year. The Rockets have taken that opportunity to sign a young coach with NBA Finals experience to lead and build this project. However, the puzzle is not a simple one to solve. Not only are most of the Rockets players really inefficient, between the Rockets' projected starting 5 of Şengün, Smith, Brooks, Green, and VanVleet, 4 of them shot below 42% last year. It remains to be seen how Udoka is able to distribute the minutes. Houston has 4 guards that can be starters: Fred VanVleet, Amen Thompson, Kevin Porter Jr., and Jalen Green, and only 2 positions to start them. Meanwhile, the small forward position has been left a little deserted, and it seems that Dillon Brooks will have to be the one in charge of starting at this position. In addition, Jabari Smith Jr.'s need for minutes for his development at the power forward position may clash with the development of Cam Whitmore, 20th pick of this past draft, who had a great performance in the Summer League, getting the MVP award. The Rockets, like other Western franchises such as the Thunder or the Spurs, are putting the final touches to a rebuilding process that needs to get going. Fans are confused by the contracts that have been offered in this free agency, considering that they'll take away flexibility and leeway from a roster that will soon have to sign important pieces and contract extensions. And even if the franchise is not between a rock and a hard place, the failure of the current project could lead to years of drought in a franchise that has not been competitive for years. The nightmares that franchises like the Orlando Magic and Sacramento Kings have experienced over the past 15 years will be repeated. But it remains to be seen who the protagonists of these stories will be.